Hi, everyone, and welcome to Your Software, Grantech Solution, or Both webinar from Grantech Systems Integration, presented by myself, Dave McKenna. Before we get started and get into the contents, I take these marketing slides they give me and alter them. Suggest to get most out of this, please remove any hamsters or distractions you might have. Please do use the chat. The chat will, I can take a look at the chat as we go, and it will help. I can't potentially answer all questions during the webinar, but it does provide the opportunity to get some information as we go. Please do answer the polls. There's a series of polls during this. Really helps me understand the audience, understands the context of where you're at, and recommend you take notes. If you've never used a fountain pen, recently started using them, and it's like skating versus walking. Recommend you try it out for notes. So who's talking? I'm Dave McKenna from Grantech. I have 20 years of experience in automation. My current title is Smart Packaging Practice Leader. I've been running our label verification and package scanning line of business since 2021. I'm going to tell you some things. Some of this is hearing the other side of the story for those of you that are end customers, that are manufacturers, that engage companies, engage integrators, engage companies like Grantech. You're going to hear a little of our side of the world, and that hopefully helps explain a few pieces and sees kind of how companies, customers, and suppliers kind of can fit together. Promise only 2 slides. Do not like vendors who talk too much about themselves instead of providing content. So who's Grantech? Grantech is a system integrator, 40 years experience, 200 employees across North America, and we can provide any and all variety of solutions in factory automation. That can be things like electrical panels, fuses, breakers, disconnects. That can be safety systems. That can be PLC controls of machines. Moving up to a higher level, it can be SCADA systems that monitor entire plants or campuses, multiple plants. It can be retrofitting an existing automated warehouse with a crane, anything and everything, ERP connection, batches, reporting, any and all manufacturing stuff. Our offices are located across North America, Canada, United States, sorry, not Mexico, and we do have an office in India as well. So first, so I can have a little bit of an understanding of who's on the call, your first poll. Who are you and what is it that you do? Please let me know who's joined in here. Are you a quality individual? Are you in capital projects engineering? Are you in operations? Are you a contractor or system integrator or supplier type person? So end customers versus fellow supplier folks versus quality individuals of quality. Wait another second or two. Those buttons are there. Get your clicking fingers out. Okay, so a bit of a split between engineering capital and some contractor, supplier, and other. Perfect, thank you. So what are we going to go over? We're going to do a very short discussion on label verification. Not to get into the details, there's other content on this. We're going to talk about the main thrust of this is using your own template. Why would you want to do that? Why would you want to stick with it? What are some of the decision points? And then some comments about how that works with engaging an integrator to help roll your template. When would you want to do that? What are some of the considerations in there? So first, what's label verification? Label verification is camera system that scans your packaging to make sure you have the right packaging on the line. This is the goal of this is to prevent recalls. Commonly used technology platform in food and beverage, consumer products, light pharmaceutical-ish things. And when we say labels, that can mean, it can mean a carton like we just showed in that previous example. It can also mean a front label, back label, neck label on a salad dressing. It could be a case label. It could be the film if you have a pouch or a bag line, whatever it is. If you're looking for a little more information about what is label verification, maybe to share across your organization, something that's a little more fun, you can go to YouTube and search for Food with Cheese Grantech or scan this QR code. I'll give you a second to all pull your phones out for that. This is a good video. It's got some fun graphics, but it explains the idea and the purpose behind label verification. Next question, actually, before we get to templates, where is your company on its label verification journey? Not appropriate, not applicable, not applicable. You're a contractor, you're an integrator, or the rest of them. If you are an end user and customer manufacturing customer, you have no system and no plans, you have aspirations, but nothing's in place right now. You have a checkbox system, or you have a full system that does everything and you're very happy. Wait another second for the total results to be tabulated. They don't have to be tabulated. We have it on a computer, but okay, perfect. So we got a mix of contractor full system. Well done. Good for you. And 2 people have aspirations and hopes. So bit of a mix across this. So first it's decision. Well, first I actually injected this clumsily on my own at the top. If you don't have your own template, that's a bigger discussion. That's kind of out of scope of this. Some of the content we're going to go through on this webinar talks about you could apply it to a build or buy kind of decision, but that's a bigger, there's more scope to that. That's a bigger piece than we're going to get into here. For the rest of the purposes of this webinar, we're going to assume you have your own template. So you have your own developed template for, let's say, a label verification system. It could be some PLC code. It could be some camera logic. It's a physical design. There's probably an electrical panel design associated with it. You've got that design. Should you keep using it? Yes, yes or no. And there's a lot of reasons, yes, to continue using your own template. If you've got a large install that's already out across your company, maybe you've been doing this for 5 years, maybe you've been doing it for 10 years. If you've got a large install, it may make sense to keep going with it. Your maintenance people are probably, or hopefully, already familiar with it. They can support it. They know how to replace components if something fails. They know how to restore backups if something breaks. Your current template may have some unique customizations, and this is a big one. If it does something like connects to your ERP system already, if it connects to common machines that you have, say every one of your sites has the same kind of filler or something like that, and your system connects to that to determine what product's running, those kind of things. So those are real customization points. Anything to do with ERP is going to be custom. Any vendor that comes in is not going to have an off-the-shelf. They might say they do, but it's not going to be exactly off-the-shelf integration with your business and your company. So if you've already figured out these really valuable customizations, it may make sense to keep with the current platform and design you have. Another is if you've got a good relationships, good purchasing agreements with vendors. So you've got a design, it uses certain components, you're getting good pricing on those, and you're getting good service and supply of those. And it works. If it's something that works well and it's an existing corporate standard, big footprint, it can definitely make sense to keep it and keep using it. In particular, if you're doing, another point not on here, but if you're doing, let's say you're moving one piece of equipment to a plant, and that plant across your company, you got a big footprint of your template and your design with your software and hardware, and then you're moving a line to this plant. You want to stick with that anyways, because you don't want to have one piece of equipment that has a totally different design than the other pieces of equipment that are already in that plant. There are reasons to change your template, and this is actually on the wrong side and shouldn't be one. It doesn't matter how old your template is. Software and automation and manufacturing, age matters from a support standpoint. Age matters from an obsolescence standpoint. Those are relevant business reasons to update something. But if it's just old and it looks old or it looks old-fashioned, it doesn't matter. This is real. We are business people. We're manufacturing professionals. It's about having a system that meets the needs of the operators and maintenance. It's not about, hey, there's something prettier out there. Unless it's real value, I wouldn't recommend changing stuff to just be prettier. This isn't, again, Microsoft has new, better looking emojis than before. Who cares? We don't need to update stuff just to be prettier. What is important is, are you on the right platform? So there are things do change in the industry. One great shining example is inductive automation. The producers of Ignition SCADA software have really changed the market for SCADA software. Their package does a lot of things very nicely. It's easier and faster to develop in. It's easier and faster to maintain and extend. And The licensing model is very different. That gives you a lot more flexibility to add things to it without having to get more money to buy more licenses. So maybe there's some change in the industry. Maybe there's some new hardware or software vendor or system that's come in, that's been around for a bit, that changes kind of what you should look at and how you should be doing things. Another that ties into that, I don't have this on there, is maybe security would be another actually big concern. And if there's new hardware or software that can improve your security system or help you harden your network, then that's something that's definitely worth looking at. It is an ongoing issue with manufacturers, cybersecurity and attacks, and well, not just manufacturers, but everybody out there. So yeah, maybe your old design worked, but it's harder to secure, it's harder to patch, and you won't see that weakness until you get hit. So that's the harder point to make that business case for some of those, but maybe a new platform is easier to secure and worth a look. The other big one is from an operator standpoint, because we talk a lot hardware, software, and vendors and trends, but we're doing all this for the operator who's on the line trying to produce product. And is it worth updating or changing our template or using the vendor's template to make that operator's life easier? Is there some new function or feature that can help them do their job? And in that case, yes, that's makes something worth looking at. So some of the examples of this, maybe your old system, again, from a label verification standpoint, maybe it didn't save images, so you can look back and see where the problems were on some packaging. Maybe it doesn't send notification emails to quality about something going on, and that's what we wanted to add. Maybe it doesn't let you troubleshoot as easily on the line, and they have to call maintenance. If we can give operators more troubleshooting tools directly at the line, let them see the images from the camera better, let them see the live camera better, give them troubleshooting tools and guides and videos on the line, if that fits, those kind of things can be worth driving a change and updating the system for. So let's say you've decided you're going to stick with your own template. A big question to ask, and this needs to be reviewed on some level, and I would recommend annually, because that seems to be the frequency that bigger kind of changes happen at a minimum, is you want to decide, you want to use your own template. We're not going to change things. We're going to keep what we were doing. Perfect. Okay. Can you actually keep using your own template? Because at times there's hardware or software that the vendors that you're using, your hardware supplier, your software supplier, sometimes they make changes that kind of force you to change or force you to adapt. So a recent example, Rockwell has updated their PanelView Plus platform. In many ways, it's still the same as it was before, but now it runs on a new operating system. Excuse me, and some of the features that it had in the old one haven't been brought over yet. Some are brought over, but they work differently. The web browser, you could put a web browser on their PanelView Plus operator screen. Well, now that web browser has to be full screen. And Cognex made some changes. So Cognex updated how you can display images from cameras. They used to have a software that could run on these Rockwell screens. Well, now that doesn't work anymore. And Cognex is going more towards you open a web browser and connect to your camera and you can see images. So if your suppliers are changing things, sometimes hopefully you're not having two suppliers change things at the same time, like this example. But if your suppliers are changing things, do you have to modify your design to handle that change? And if it's a big enough change handling your supplier changes, well, then is it time to reconsider what you're doing and take a look at everything? Because again, your hand can get forced by the suppliers that you're using for your design. So let's say that that's all fine and you're going to stick with your design. You're going to stick with using your own template. You may still want to use an integrator. And why would you want an integrator? Well, if you're rolling out your design, your software, your code, your PLC projects, your SCADA system, this is it's custom code to everyone else in the world. To you, it's your standard and your template, but to everyone else in the world, this is custom stuff that they've never seen before. So there's value in an integrator can do that kind of custom work. An integrator handles custom work all the time. So for them to absorb your project and then go roll it out, that's the kind of piece that they do. So an OEM doesn't really fit with that. That's not their business model. That's not the kind of work they like to do. They like to, if they make palletizers, they like to make the same palletizer all day long and not change it. They've got their niche. So that's the kind of company you want to work with. The other advantage with an integrator, again, aside from handling custom, it's a custom project to everyone else. An integrator can handle that. You're going to have custom work with that project. So you've got to take this platform you have and probably hook it into your lines and your plants. And if for a packaging system like we've been talking about, you might need to connect it to the cartoners to tell the cartoner to stop if the wrong packaging there, or tell a bagger to stop, or tell a conveyor to stop, or tell an upstream conveyor to stop once you've stopped the cartoner so that stuff doesn't jam and fall off the conveyor and you have problems. So there's going to be integration work of dropping your template in across your whole organization. And that's where, again, an integrator shines at doing that type of those custom tie-ins of a known template. The other third point is you're going to have peaks and valleys on this. So you may, depending on the nature of your enterprise, need additional help, need manpower, staffing to be able to roll this out. So maybe that's because you've got, if you're a brewery kind of business, you might have huge volume to produce in the summer and nobody do any changes in the plants. And then you've got quiet times and you need to get lots of work done. You need to get all your, you need to take advantage of downtime or less production needs. So you've got this real peak of work and during a seasonal time when you can do changes to your plants and modify things. It can help to bring in other people for that. And the last is, do you really want to hire? Do you want to, if you just need to get this template that you have rolled out, do you want to hire and train and manage and keep staff on payroll to do that? Or you really just want to have it done and then that contractor goes away and that work's been done and you're okay. So considerations on engaging someone else to kind of do that. Next, we're going to do another poll. So if you are, again, NA, if you're not a manufacturer, if you're a manufacturer, do you have a process for bringing in vendors, bringing in an integrator to use your template and execute your code and your vision on your plants? Is that something you have? Or so yes, no, maybe, maybe, or maybe something, or not applicable. I am not a manufacturer. I am a contractor, integrator, kind of a person. Waiting for polling. Okay, so we got about a mix of no, maybe, and not applicables. I'm very interested to see that nobody said yes. So that's a pretty scary sign and maybe state of the industry. But so now, okay, we've decided we're going to use our template. I'm a manufacturer. I'm going to use my own template, my own design that I want. I need an integrator because I've got 6 plants to do over the next year. I don't want to hire people and then let them go when that work's finished. And I need a whole bunch done in August because that's when I get downtime on some of these plants. There is an onboarding piece to engaging with an integrator. So first you have to find someone you want to work with. You need to find a reputable company. You want someone that there's a bunch of, probably your procurement department has certain requirements on insurance and health and safety pieces that vendor needs to be up to speed with. There's going to be some legal stuff, which usually gets wrapped into a master service agreement that says things about warranties and billing and all that. So there's a big find somebody, and then there's a whole legal procurement process that kind of happens next. Then you got to get some quotes. What are the cost of this? You got to get your own PO and go through your own internal processes to get funding. And then the IT piece starts, which there's quite a bit here. If for recommendation, and yes, I'm completely biased on this, but Grantech is a member of the CSIA, so not the Canadian Ski Instructors Alliance, but that might show up as your top Google result, depending on if Google thinks you like skiing and are Canadian. The CSIA is Control System Integrator Association. They have a series of vetting processes, and there's membership requirements and internal processes you have to have. So it does it is a good organization and really put some checks and balances on the companies in it. It's stringent to get in it and maintain your certification. So lots of steps to engaging that onboarding that integrator and bringing them in. And then once you've sort of got your quotes, well, how are you quoting this? So this is something we've seen. I'll be honest, we've seen customers not clearly understand. There's generally two ways to run a project, and there's some finer points to these, and there's some variations of these, but it kind of rolls up to two. You can go time and material, or you can go fixed price. So time and material is you pay for time and you pay for material. So you're paying based on hours of that someone worked. You're paying a certain rate based on maybe it's a blended rate. All the anybody from that integrator comes to you at a certain rate, or you pay different rates for different levels of employees. You pay for materials plus an agreed upon markup amount. Fixed price, there's a clear scope. I need quantity 2 of these inspection systems put on these lines, and I will pay X $1,000 for it. If you do not have the scope clearly written up and defined, or the vendor doesn't know your company and your systems, and there's not really an ability to define that. If you're using your own template, that's going to be the case on the first one, that this may not be clearly defined. And you go time material, understand that is time and material. So if there's delays, if there's months go by without the project really getting off the ground, but there's still discussions that you need to have to figure out, okay, when are we doing this? How do I schedule the people that are needed? Are you getting us IT access? Okay, next week, no, you didn't get it. Well, are you getting it? Those ongoing discussions that keep needing to happen to try to move things forward, they cost money. If there is time being spent on your project, it is charging you money. It's like sitting in a taxi cab, the meter's on. And this is something that there's misunderstandings that happen on occasionally. But if you can't organize the scope, or it's not clear on what the scope is, and so if you're using your template, this could be possible. If you haven't sort of mapped everything out and laid it all out, if there's time spent on it, it's going to be a cost. Once you've got these vendor lined up, everything's ready to go, you need to get remote access. And even that kind of piece, we've seen companies struggle with that. We've seen it take 3 to 6 months to get remote access for us to be able to work on a client system. And that can kind of start to kill a project if there was momentum, things got priced and quoted, people got lined up, we're ready to start working on it. Okay, come back 3 to 6 months later, now you've got IT access. Well, maybe those people have been reassigned. Integrators have to keep people busy. It's a service industry. So maybe now we're starting all over again with a different person. And that's not what the integrator wants to do. That's not what the client wants. But if some of this onboarding is very painful, then it can derail projects. Remote access, there's other things that an integrator is going to need, and it would be the same thing an internal person would need if they're going to roll out your template. They're going to need to know what are the devices in your plant, what are the network addresses of those, where's the code that we're supposed to deploy. So if we're going to integrate into a plant that has 4 cartners, what are the IPs of those cartners? What kind of devices are they? What code do we use on them? Is there a different version of your template for cartners versus for baggers? Versus baggers that need multiple cameras on it. You need to have all this in. If you want an integrator using your template, you need to have all this information ready. And does any of this exist? Is this written down? One example, and if it's not, then an integrator can help you get that and can do calls to the plants. If this is an enterprise-wide rollout, do calls with the plants to kind of tease out that information. But that's something that will take time and can add time to the project and potentially add cost. One thing we've seen is honestly just determining the number of lines at a plant is sometimes a little bit of a tricky thing because lines are being moved, or this line is down for some reason, it's going to come up later, or there's a big project to replace a key machine on this line, so there's no point. Yes, it's there still, but there's no point in doing anything on it because it's going to be reworked in 4 months. So come back after that and then work on it, kind of thing. So that should be a relatively simple thing, is how many lines do you have? is often a bunch of conversation with a plant. How many SKUs you run, what SKUs are they, how many packaging formats you have, that kind of information. Again, it affects the design, it affects the usage of your template. Those are also things that aren't easy to know. So before you, if you are using your own template, how much of this stuff do you have written down? How much of this is something you're going to get, or how much of this is something you need to engage the integrator to go, again, tease out of the plants as part of a process. And that's these things. Again, if some of this starts to take too long, it can really hurt the project. So a question we get some of the time is, why do I have to train you? Why do I have to train the vendor? You're getting my business, and I'm paying you, I'm hiring you, you're going to be doing this work. Why is there a training process for the vendor? And this is where the Phil Collins there's two sides to the story comes in a bit. The first is what business? So how much of this is there? And that's an interesting one. Some of the time, integrators, sometimes we get some carrots dangled in front of us, and yeah, we got 15 more lines to do on this, and sometimes there is 15 more lines, and sometimes there isn't. There's one, and then the other ones are later, or there's no budget for them now, or they're not fully depreciated. So come back in 5 years, because we have to depreciate those fully first, and then we can get on to the rest of them. So there's a bit of a question some of the time on how much business there really is. If you are able to, again, you're using your own template, if you're able to package up a larger chunk of work, then it's an easier matter for, and depending on the schedule of the work, the more information you have on the schedule of an enterprise rollout of your own template, and the number of plants, and when and where, and how much you have real budget for, and how much is really planned, and so on. The more that you have, that can change this conversation. If there's a large rollout over a prolonged period, then there's efficiencies for the integrator on that. There's fewer people that need to learn this and be trained up. There's a known schedule. Sure, you know what? We can figure something out on the training, because it's going to be the same crew, and they're going to go from plant to plant, and so on and so forth. If there's a lot of uncertainty about how many installs and when, and which ones are actually happening, and then there's huge delays on things, so that second line clearly isn't coming soon because the first one's taking longer because you can't get us remote access, then it's really a different story. And so there is real cost to the integrator to learn your template, which, to point number 2, is custom. This cannot be used anywhere else. You don't want us putting your intellectual property, your template, out anywhere else. We don't want to put it out anywhere else. It's yours. So the time spent learning what your template is sort of sunk time only to your install and the number of lines and plants that you're engaging on. The third point, and I think this is, at least personally, this is the strongest one. There's cost for training and learning your system, because you want it done an exact way. So typically you give 10 programmers the same tools, you give them the same programming language, and you tell them to solve the same problem, 10 programmers in a room, and you're going to get 10 different solutions. Now, they all work, and there are 10 different ways of doing many things in programming, and 10 of those could be perfectly fine, as long as they're efficient and documented clearly. And there's some stuff you just have to do a certain way, but they all work, and they're clearly documented, reasonably efficient, decent on memory, so on and so forth. You handle edge cases and exceptions properly. Okay, there are 10 ways of solving that problem. Yeah, but that's not what you want. If you're using your own template, you don't want 10 solutions to the same problem, depending on who's doing it. You want something done an exact certain way, exactly every single time. And if you want that, then that requires training and instruction to make sure that you get exactly something done in an exact certain way every time. So what if, another problem that comes up, a question from customers, is what if things go awry? And we recommend handling this. So this is this kind of thing, like, I have a template, okay, I'm installing it, and I go to the site. Well, hey, it's different than I was told. There's this line doesn't have one cartoner, it has two legs, and there's another cartoner, or it gets rework loaded into it at this different point, and or it has an extra camera in our template. There's no existing template we were given that handles having an extra camera that does something else. What do you do? And so we recommend customers, and it's a discussion. It should be a discussion in advance with the integrator to the customer on what's the strategy and what's the intent, what's the spirit of your design. And so if it does need to be extended, hopefully shouldn't be on site at the last minute, but if it does need to be extended, what are we trying to do? How do you generally want things handled and laid out, so that those extensions and additional design work kind of fits with what's already there, or fits the way you want it, what's already there. The other part is what's critical and what's important on this that you don't want change, period. So what are the run rules if something does need to be changed or modified? Just do it and notify you about it. Don't do it and call. Do it and make a phone call and who are those people and what availability do they have, and so on and so forth. So these things will come up. There will be, it's manufacturing. You'll find every variety of anything if you go to enough plants. How do you want the integrator to handle unexpected change or challenges? Now on to another poll question. Which is the latest version? File 2024-0105R2, file 0501, 501, 2024, 0105, 2024, 0401, 0204. Use this one for reals. Which one is the latest? This gets into template management, naming conventions. It's a bit of waiting, polling. Gets into an interesting split here. So it's split between the for reals file and then the R2. So it's unclear. And this is the one that drives me up the wall. I'm sure you've seen underscore the latest or underscore use this one. Well, hopefully you haven't, but you probably have. Month, day, year, month, day, like which one are you using if you're under 12? It's a bit of a guess if someone's going back and forth on one. Now you've got so you've got an integrator, you've got your procurement steps all taken care of, you've got your template handed out, you've got some run rules for how to handle change. Now you need to track this program, track this project, track your code, track and store the code, track and store artifacts, training materials, other pieces. So there's quite a few things on an enterprise-wide rollout of a system, of a solution that's being dropped into your plants. How do you want to handle this? So there's tools like Git to handle source control and different versions of code and changes that are made of them. You can do stuff with SharePoint. You can do things with SharePoint using SharePoint versioning. You can rename files. There's tools from Rockwell and other automation vendors to handle management. You can do it in Excel. What is the right tool for your application? Who's in control of the latest? Where do you get the latest from? How do you submit things for change? There's lots of ways of handling that. And what is the right? So this is again a conversation between someone using your template and yourself with your own employees making changes. As soon as you grow to a certain size, just internally, you may need some of these tools to help manage. You should use some of these tools, at least the simpler ones, to manage which versions and what's stored where. And with customers, we've seen with their own templates, and doing work themselves, there's sometimes a level of documentation and rigor that they may not do, that an integrator or another vendor or an outside vendor would want to do. And one of those is around FATs and SATs. So are you documenting that this has been fully installed? Are you documenting that it's tested and completed? Are you handing over to the plant? Would highly recommend this as a best practice. even if it is internal, that you're kind of completing an internal project while you're now handing it over to the facility. The project team, whether that's a vendor or internal, is now finished. Training is another one. Training materials, videos that may be created, documents, manuals, operator manuals, user manuals, any of that. Do you have all that? Where's the latest ones? Where's the ones that were issued to the plants? Is this being managed on the plant side and everything gets handed over and stored however that facility happens to do it? Is it stored in some central location, which would be my strong recommendation, that it's stored in a central location. There's a central hub for all the content related to the program. It's also issued to the plants, but they have the address to get to all of it. How are you handling all that? So those are things to decide, and those are things, again, if you're using your own template, these are things that, again, this can be a conversation with integrator. We've done a lot of this on some best practices and ways of managing that. So what is an FAT? This one gets misunderstood and confused quite often, I've seen. So is an FAT a test at my factory when you're done? Is it a test at your factory? That should be actually after. No, sorry, let me back up. Whose factory are we talking about here? Is it a test at the customer factory, the end customer factory when you're done? Is it a test at, let's say, Grantech integrator factory before things are shipped? Is it what you get when you eat too much bacon or pizza? Pizza's tough too. There's a whole series of foods, really. Not meaning to pick on bacon. Okay, so we had both answers, which just goes to say, so factory acceptance test, at least the definition I've been using in my career, has been at the vendor's factory. So if you are a cartoner builder, you do a factory acceptance test at your cartoner factory. You do a site acceptance test when it arrives at the site where it's going to live forever. But this one, again, terminology is the devil, and I've seen these confused on which factory and whose factory and which factory. So last piece. So now you're successful. Hopefully you're successful in all this. You've got your own template. You did some thinking and decided to keep it. You've engaged an integrator to help you roll it out. You've gone through procurement with them and health and safety and IS Networld or whatever tools you're using on all that. You've given them all the great documents that you had to help them along at the site, or they've managed to call the site and figure some things out. Everything's been deployed and signed off. All the turnover package and all the documentation is findable somewhere, and everything's going great. You're completing your program. What else can happen from this? And I think this is an important consideration. If you are engaging someone else, and there's a little bit of effort on a client side to bringing in an outside company to do this work, what else can you potentially get from that? What are other opportunities to help between the two companies? And I think a big one that stands out is remote support. Remote support is something that if you are using your own in-house team to roll out your template, it's probably not that big of a team. They're potentially more engineering type employees and staff. And it's highly unlikely that you've from that group of people that you've got people on 24/7 coverage. You probably don't have enough in your department, and even if you did, maybe they weren't hired into working nights on an ongoing standing basis. So remote support is an excellent opportunity to, I brought in this other company, they learned my business, they've learned my system, they've deployed it for me at sites. Now they can pick up the phone at midnight instead of my valuable controls person with 10 years of experience who's just had a baby and yes, he or she is already up at night, so maybe that's a bad example, but doesn't want to get called in the middle of the night anymore. So that's a great one where there's an opportunity for both companies to help each other. Another one is I think training, because training is an ongoing thing that needs to be refreshed and renewed at facilities. Again, if you have an integrator who knows your system, knows your template, your business, they can go back to sites, they can retrain sites, retrain maintenance people. We're all managing turnover on a continual basis. They can help sites that kind of fall down. So any system you put in there's going to be some degradation depending on the strength of the maintenance people there, depending on the variety of change, depending on the support from the facility to keep it running. So they can drop into some of these struggling places and remediate them. And that's something we've done more on older installations, typically like a 3-5 year. If it's not maintained well, things degrade. So we've come into sites and done a remediation report. And I think the other one, you're no longer on your own, right? So there's your vendor, your integrator who knows this. They should be bringing you new ideas. If they're not, then they're doing you a disservice. They are at other companies. They are leveraging they should be at other companies and leveraging new technology from vendors. So they're seeing more things. They're seeing things you're not. That they should be bringing you new ideas and potentially enhancements, improvements, updates, maybe some new reporting, maybe ways of connecting all your sites together to get kind of enterprise level reporting and management of that. Maybe new trends in vision, whatever it is, you're not on your own, but these people are out at other places and should be bringing you new ideas to update. And maybe they don't fit. A lot of this stuff sometimes doesn't fit, but at the least they should be feeding you some new ideas and trends in the industry. And that's the end of the slideshow kind of presentation part of this. We'll take some questions right now, and thanks for listening about using your own template and engaging an integrator to help you do that. Please do type any questions you have in the chat, and I will be monitoring the chat as we go here. So why do I need an integrator at all if it's my own template? And so, yeah, you don't need someone else to do it if it's yours. If you had the staff to create this in the first place and those staff are sufficient, then yeah, you could do all installation and everything yourself. Now, maybe we have slide on peaks and valleys. So maybe you have a bunch of installs to do at once. Maybe you have a corporate mandate to roll this out across the company in 2 years. Maybe that person who developed this doesn't want to be on the road all the time. That's a big one. Some people do not want to travel 52 weeks a year or any. So that can be a big one just right there. Maybe the amount of costs and so on associated with travel for sending one person all around versus a company who has offices next to some of your plants. Maybe that there's a savings there and a cost difference there. Maybe not, but technically, yeah, you wouldn't have to. It's more of a, do you have the staff to do it yourself? Do you want to do it yourself? Do you want to put your staff on something else that's a higher priority, that's really custom to your business that they can help with, versus turning the crank and repeating an install of a template you already have? Second question, how long does the engagement process with Grantech typically take before the project begins? Typically, it's atypical. There's a lot of variation in how long things can take, from initial discussion to purchase order award to an install being kind of completed. It really varies a lot. A lot of times, I'll say like a smaller pilot-y type thing, unless there's some giant hurdle with signing a master service agreement, that should be able to be completed if you can get the funding side of it kind of set up, and depending on how much you've done ahead of time on your end. But I think that's more like a weeks or months, depending on lead time of things needing to be purchased or so on. But that's more like, I'd say, months. Some larger enterprise-wide, getting that really kicked off, usually it seems to be more in the 12 to 18 month kind of cycle. And I think a lot of that depends on budget cycles, and usually there's a lot of conversation and setup, and okay, everyone's going to agree to work together, and here's how we're going to work together. Then someone's got to go kind of line up money, which is typically for next year. Does Grantech provide a checklist for what we would need to provide to start the project on the right foot? And so we do this with customers that we work with. It's adapted, again, based on the project and the situation, and if it's your template and how you're doing it. But yes, we would, particularly a lot particularly on, and even if it's not your template, actually, if it's Grantech code and Grantech system being installed, there's still a lot of stuff to be done sort of by both parties. There's a lot on the IT side, not just access, but potentially setting up servers and configuring networking. There's chunks that no matter what are usually owned on the client side, and yeah, you want to make sure those are properly coordinated, who's doing what, and things are getting completed kind of in time. So yes. When would I want to make my own template? When would you want to develop your own? Again, I'm biased in answering this, but if you had your own engineering, software development, controls development people, if you had your own people and you had the time, and there's some very, very specific kind of customizations to your business or your plant, then it makes a lot of sense. If you have some odd, strange ERP system, if you have some quality management system that you definitely need to interface with, and you want to interface with ERP, and you want something else, and you have the people and you have the time, then that would kind of call out more for doing it yourself. If it's, and at the same time, a vendor who has a system can also do modifications to integrate with that. But that's where it makes more sense to me. Now, most companies just aren't set up with large internal engineering groups who kind of have the time to do things that other companies have as kind of off the shelf. So it's a little less common to see, but I think that would be the instance when. How do I compare different vendor templates? A couple thoughts to that. One would be feature. Like there's features you're going to be able to see. What's the operator experience on both of them? How does it help an operator troubleshoot? How does it help an operator run the line? Which one needs more work by an operator versus it's automatic or more automated? What's the price? What's the architecture? Is one using more expensive hardware, software? Is that better? Why? It's kind of much like comparing templates between vendors is kind of just it's similar to just comparing vendors and their products and the dimensions of features, support they have on it. Much like comparing any other vendors on it. I think the only difference is once you've made a decision, you're kind of locking into, well, you're not locking in, but you don't presumably want too many different versions of stuff floating around in your company. So you're a little more committed if you're picking like a software template or software hardware template that you're going to roll out across your company. I think you're committed more with that than if you were, for example, buying something like you're buying like a printer. If you're buying a labeler, you drop it in, it gets some start go signal or something, and the labeler companies will probably hate me, but you buy a labeler, you drop, yes, there's some work to putting it in, but now it's going to label stuff. 3 or 4 years later, it's worn out. 5 years later, whatever it is, you put a different printer in, you give it a go signal or a sensor, it's going to label. So those kind of devices, I'm not picking on them, but they can be replaced with a different one by just ripping something out that's broken or worn out and dropping a new one in. If you're going with like a hardware, software, and it's integrated to the line, and it may potentially be more, and it talks to your ERP system, and your operators are trained on picking SKU or doing a bunch of things in it, then it may be more difficult to replace it with something else later. So that would be the only, again, I'm a little biased because this is my industry, but I think it's a little harder to replace than some like pure hardware components. Are other companies standardizing on a template? We use OEM different solutions in different sites. Good question, and we see a variety. So some companies want, some of this depends on the state of the company and how far they've gone with installing. But again, I'll pick label verification. So some companies are new to it and they want it solved in a timely manner, and they want standardization and all plants to have a similar system or the same system, and so they'll standardize on one vendor. Some companies, their goal is to say, we did it, we did something, and so they will vary a lot. They will have in some plants, they're solving a problem with an OEM. They get the cartoner vendor to add something. They get a bagger vendor to add something. They get a local integrator with two guys at a van to add something. They get a distributor to put something in. Who knows? And then you have a different solution to the same problem in 50 plants and differing across even lines in the same facility. And some companies are okay with that. They can say to regulatory authorities, we've met the need. They may not have done it exactly the same way in each place, and the risk to that is some of the finer points of business decisions. So on a scanning system, do you want it bypassable? Do you not? Do you want it bypassable but by certain security levels only? Do you want it bypassable by certain security but there's like a timeout, and after 8 hours it goes back into normal mode? Did all of those, that cartoner vendor and that two guys in a van and the in-house work done by the plant and the distributor, did all of them do that the same way? And was there even a document or guidance that said you had to do it the same way, to these fine point details of a solution? So in answer to your question, are other companies standardizing in a template? Some do and some do not. And yeah, some go with OEMs and different solutions that meet, I'll say, the core requirement, but then may vary on some of the details and finer points. That's the last question I see that's been submitted. So thank you for attending. Hope this was informational, educational, and useful. Anyone who has registered, they will be sent a recording of this session. And if you do have any other questions, please send a note to info@grantech.com. And thank you again.